So let me introduce myself. I'm Joseph Hacker. As Nick said, I'm the principal planner for technology and operations at the Atlanta Regional Commission. Only for a couple of years, only for like 18 months. So I'm somewhat new to this, but I'm not new to planning. Prior to that, I was at Georgia State University, where I was a clinical professor of planning and economic development for 12 years. And I worked at DVRPC, Go Birds, for about 12 years. I saw some DVRPC people on there. Nice to see that. And then I was a planner, County of Delaware. And prior to that, in 97, I got my doctorate in MA in city and regional planning at the University of Pennsylvania. So, nearly 30 years of this and in the planning profession. So it's kind of cool. Picture there is at the ITS World Congress recently. I'd be curious, with a show of thumbs, how many folks were at ITS World Congress? Any of you all? 1, 2, 3. 3 of you. 4. All right. Well, I think I wanted to start with that because certainly the ITS World Congress set me up to begin to think about the plan and what I can do. And I had a couple takeaways that shape what you're going to see in the rest of this. There's so many things to talk about with the plan, but a couple of takeaways that you're going to see come up over and over again. This idea that there's the speed of technological change. I don't think there's any mystery about this. Software, hardware, scalability. To me, it was astounding. And like I say, we'll talk about this more later. I thought if I had to put a key, I should have put this one first, but using versus applying technology. And I make that distinction in using the question, what is the problem being solved? When we apply technology, we're solving a problem. When we're using technology, I think we're just trying it out. Vulnerable road users. I went to quite a few sessions where this was a significant theme, and I think you're going to see this reflected in some of the things I'm going to talk about, where the end user really is who needs to be should not be lost in the consideration of these plans. And then finally, privacy and cybersecurity. As we make the technology more convenient, it's much more open to being hacked. And there were a number of fairly scary examples given in that I thought, wow, like we know this, but it really needs to be at the forefront of our thinking in many respects. And I want to give a shout out here to Lori Matkowski. She's with GFT now, former colleague at DVRPC, cubicle neighbor. And she helped shape my thinking on a bunch of these items. So off to the races. What are we? Well, we're the Atlanta Regional Commission. You can see we're the 19 county MPO, home to about 6.1 million people. We're expected to grow to 7.9, so another 1.5 million plus in the next 25 years. That's a lot of folks. And I think it's important to note here, and Caleb and I, when we talked yesterday, it sort of comes up, this idea that we don't own, manage, nor operate any TSMO assets, right? So I think, that's mostly done by Georgia DOT. And I think it's important to say that, just in the sense that, if we were owning and operating it, we might have our plan might look different, or our approach to the plan might be different. So I think it's worth saying that in many cases as we think about it. Right. What's our vision? One great region. You can read this. We foster thriving communities, right? We value excellence, integrity, and equity. One of the things I noticed in putting this presentation together, and you'll see that there's a lot of goals and visioning. And I think this is some of our foundational institutional goals that we work with. And so I need to put that there. I think it's important to realize where we're coming from. And you can look on the right there, healthy, safe, livable communities. That falls nicely into TSMO. Strategic investments, excellence and efficiency, diverse stakeholders engagement, competitive economy, all these things, TSMO falls into them in some way. I don't mean to be didactic here, but I thought it's certainly worth taking a second to think about TSMO. You'll see this again in a different context, but you can see, you know, there's all these different TSMO strategies. You know, some examples: traffic incident management, integrated corridor management, parking management, traveler information, freight management, traffic signal management. I think some of the things when we think about these are kind of the hardware elements of it, but some of the elements that aren't included here that I think are essential as we start thinking about the plan are the connections, the links, the physical ties between the systems. We'll talk about that in a minute. The agreements, the cross-jurisdictional, the intergovernmental agreements that make these work. Taken in isolation, none of these work. They only work when they are connected. Also want to shout out here that there's a couple of non-ITS strategies available here. And let me go to this next slide here. This is like, I have 70 slides. So you know, so we're gonna see a lot. I'm just kidding, I don't have 70 slides. But let me just show you some TSMO in our region here. And I think that it's important to look at this in the upper left corner, this roundabout. That is a TSMO, that is a Transportation Systems Management and Operation application, a strategy right there. And it's as low tech can be. I was recently at a TRB conference on roundabouts, and it was fascinating the degree to which these can be used and how they're used and the effectiveness that they meet all the goals that you would think of with any of our sort of ITS-laden opportunities. In the middle there at the top is also, it's a Waymo. I don't know if y'all have this, but this is automated vehicles. We have them in Atlanta now. There is no place you can go in the downtown or the city area, the in-town area, where you don't see these driving around. There is no driver in them. They had, right? It's a little weird sometimes, but they're very visible and will pick you up and take you somewhere. So, right, this is a really interesting example of private industry. You can see the 511. This is a GDOT. This is a traveler information. This was developed for the Olympics. You can see at the bottom, this is a smart project in Gwinnett County. I'm going to talk about an application of that in a little bit. And right to the bottom right there is another project. This is called the Wendy diagram. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a little bit. So what was done for our last plan? I'm not going to read this to you, but what I have highlighted there is what I think ended up being the most important part of our plan. And I'm going to end up talking about that a good amount later. And that is, we developed what's called a local agency deployment guide. This is a great item in our plan. If we think about plans before this, our first plan was around the early aughts, 2004, I think. That's our first architecture. Our second plan, which is the plan you're looking at here. And then we're having, in the middle of an update, we're going to have an RFP on the street in the fourth quarter of this year. And we expect to have that finished by 2027. So there's an evolution in thinking here, which I'll allude to as we move on. And I think a lot of this is going to be about what we've learned. So there we go. Part two here. One of the things Nick referred to is this best practices sheet. I took a few minutes and I looked through these resources, these different plans there, and I thought it was fascinating. Like, why would you choose ARC versus DVRPC or Genesee Finger Lakes or any of them? When I looked through them, they're all great examples of strategic, programmatic, or tactical best practices. But I think where they differ is in their emphasis area. I think also when I'm thinking about these and I look at this, I'm thinking about what is the delta, right? As a takeaway, right? Again, it says reflections. These are the spoilers. I'm giving you the answers in advance, but what is the delta since our last plan? Like, what changed? Like, what did you move? What's the critical factor that was changed, right? So we want to know that. What is the delta? And maybe part of that is part of what I'm here for, I'm glad for, is I want to steal your ideas. I'm not sure how much I have to give you, though I am going to give you something, but I'm interested in what you are doing out there, because I think that's going to tell me what worked. And that's what I want to know. And then again, let's plan, how will this plan benefit the user? And I think of the user in a couple of ways, both the user of the plan, but also the end user. What are they going to do with this? All right. Let me see. Let me start talking about the architecture. All right. The architecture is required. The rest of the document, to a large degree, is not required. Or it could be done many different ways, but the architecture is the architecture. And I remember when I was still at DVRPC, we did some of the first, we started with the architecture back in the early aughts. And I just remember no one having multiple rooms multiple times with elected officials and different folks in there and trying to describe what the architecture is. And I'm going to tell you that, I have here, who is responsible for it? What is the information flow? What is the thing, right? What is the hardware there? What does it do? These are all explanations of the architecture. But I have to say that, sometimes we're not sure what this part of the document does aside from being required. Now, I'm sure I'm looking forward for someone to tell us this. I don't know. Later, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we see here. And the architecture is not really looked at online very much. So I don't know if everyone already has it, if the vendors already have internalized it, if GDOT just, this is like the rules that they give to everyone, but it's a required portion of it. And it's a portion that when I have to stand up in front of our board, I have to be able to explain in some way what this is. And this slide here is about as clear as I can come to it, and explaining that it just really outlines the relationship between these parts. And folks seem to nod their head and I'm able to move on. So I'm going to leave that there. Let's see. Come on. All right. Now we're getting to it. When we think about best practices, again, I think that everyone's plans had all the parts, but I think the parts reflect the emphasis of the region's capabilities and strengths. So what ARC may be capable of, what our region may be capable of, may be different than what Oregon Metros or DVRPC or any other places out there. And what I'm going to focus on here, and as we go through it, that's kind of going to be it, but we're going to talk about our plan running through the business case, our vision and program mission, our priority functions, programmatic objectives, TSMO culture, implementation, and prioritize services, activities, and projects. One at a time, because I just want to give a sense for all those out there. I heard a lot of you are interested in, you're all getting updates. This may be something, I'm just gonna open up the hood of the car and let you look at the engine here. Right, so what was our process for development? I'm sure all of our processes are somewhat similar. Can't say for sure, but so there's no surprises when you look at this. Ultimately, what you're going to see later in this is that I'm going to switch defining the building blocks and developing a common vision. I'm going to, and you're going to see the reason for that. But giving it away in advance, it's about data-driven policy, and I think I want to emphasize that moving forward. Looking backward, this looks like every other plan I've ever worked on, there's nothing wrong with it. Right, so why do we need it? Well, if you know anything about Atlanta, you know it's got a lot of traffic. And you can see here that the biggest problem facing residents in the Metropolitan is transportation. And typically what they're talking about there is congestion. Honestly, this isn't that much different from other places. You know, maybe the numbers are different, the delay or the times of day or that kind of thing. But I think this is, you know, this is a pretty broad justification for this TSMO plan. And I think it probably is a pretty broadly used across the board. What about a business case for TSMO? Well, let's be direct. TSMO is cheaper than building your way out of it. TSMO is cheaper and yields results. I'm not expecting you to read all these tables here, but you know, you're getting, 9 times the investment payout. You're getting 17 times the investment, right? So you're dollar costing, put $1 into a TSMO project involving optimized traffic signals, and you're getting $17 worth of value out of that. That's pretty good. When you look at the traditional road capacity, you might be able to expand the road and your dollar might yield close to $3 in benefits, but that pales by any of these other TSMO strategies. And what I would also say here is that the TSMO in many respects is less invasive. We don't have to stop traffic. We don't have to have construction in the same way. So there's another savings there. So, right, so there is a business case here. I don't want to pull too hard on this, but I think that there is clearly a business case here. And I think you'll see that this is layered throughout our plan, that this recognition that there's a benefit just comes up over and over again. So what is our vision? Right, I've highlighted a couple things here. In this case, the vision drove our plan. Optimize safety, reliable travel times, efficient, seamless travel, environmental benefits, right? These are all things that when I look at all of your plans, they all look somewhat similar. I have asterisks here besides equitable access. Not sure if we're allowed to talk about equity, but I think of TSMO as a lot like some elements of transit, where good TSMO is inherently equitable. If it's working for the region, then everyone benefits, right? This isn't something, I can't TSMO your apartment or something like that. So I think that while we maybe not be able to use the word equitable, I think we can find that TSMO, when it's working, functions for everyone, not for individuals, which makes it equitable. What are our foundational elements? Moving people and goods, collaboration, data sharing, adaptability. Again, nothing new here, nothing exciting here. One thing I want to point out is moving people and goods. Often what gets left aside in these conversations is TSMO as it relates to freight. I think that's I think that that's not the right approach. I think freight, everything needs freight. Everything revolves around freight, and I'll get to this more later. Adaptability, easier said than done. I think that I regard that as a significant challenge. So, at the programmatic level, what are we doing? Well, we have a 3-tiered evaluation process using goals and metrics. And these are called our key decision points, right? So after we have a regional call for projects, we call for and filter projects. And and the first way we go through it is kind of what I call a sniff test. They must comply with federal highway, GDOT, and ARC complete street policies, accommodating all modes in a safe and context-sensitive manner. I mean, that is TSMO. That is TSMO light right there. It's already getting to it. Through this slide in here, just to show this process a little bit. I worry about too many words here, but one of the criteria is mobility, access, safety. Are we reducing travel times? Are we reducing fatalities? I'm going to show this a different way. This KDP2, this is a modeling type run. You can see there that these results incorporate mobility and access. It's circled up there in our program. Does it improve congestion? I think that's the wrong word. Sounds like it's making more, but does it relieve congestion? Does it improve access? Right? These are all TSMO, hallmarks of TSMO. You get to the bottom on resiliency. Does it reduce air pollutants? Does it, under safety, does it improve safety? Right? These are all things TSMO that are marbled into it. And quite frankly, projects that come under our TSMO banner do very well under these. And these were not developed for TSMO. So what is this? This is a roadway expansion project. So depending on what that expansion is and how it's used, what that project would look like, it gets a number ranking on it. And then finally, as part of our programmatic part of it, we look at it at a benefit cost. And here, when you do that math, TSMO projects rise to the top very quickly. They're effective, and their cost benefit is very good. These summaries are directed to our executive director and voting board for decisions, right? So that's our process. We already know these things are good. Shifting to tactical, what are best practices here? I'm only going to focus on one here because I think this is a really good one, and that is our deployment guide. And I think the approach, again, I did not make this document, or I was not involved with that, but we created something, a document that empowers the user with information in order for them to gain a better understanding and provide high-level information and guidance on things they may be interested in. We're arming the user. We don't know who's going to look at it or who needs this, so we've created sort of a matrix of choices and what they could do and how they could work. And let me show you what that looks like a little bit. Right, our menu of options. Right, we're matching TSMO strategy to goals. So for each strategy, there's a description. There's how does it support, what goals does it support, how is it applied, what contexts can it be successful in, your costs, benefits, and other considerations. And again, with other considerations, I want to say, and this fits in with architecture, these would be connectivity, intergovernmental agreements, that kind of thing, and then a reference page, just so folks could click on a link and decide where it is, what it is they're looking at. Right. So what strategies are in the deployment guide? Well, if you look at the bottom there, have a bunch. These were reflected in that earlier email with the cogs. I think that that's, most of them. And if you look at them, you can, they all make sense. I think these are all chosen because they are part of our inventory in the region, so that use that. And again, I highlight freight management because again, freight doesn't get enough love, and I believe that freight is essential to all the goals in our region, because everything we use and all the goods that we have are delivered. Someone from Federal Highway a couple of years ago told me, we're talking about highways, they go, the last mile of everything is using rubber tires. I think they're right about that, even if they're robot rubber tires, which we'll talk about in a second. Right, so a question, one of the things that concerns me is about legibility. Like, to what degree is it used or whatnot? So this has been up on our web for 5 years. So you fast forward 4 years, in the last year, we've had 391 views and 227 unique users. Right, so we're getting 32 daily views and about 18 downloads a month. This is, 4 or 5 years in. So this stuff is being used, and it's not just me downloading the things over and over again for the PowerPoint. These are like actual users. We looked at it, where they're coming from, a lot of CIDs, local communities, whatnot. They're just showing their interest. And of these downloads, you can look here, and the strategic plan, which is sort of the big picture of what we're doing, is one of them. But the deployment guide is right on its heels. A lot of that's being downloaded. There is a regional inventory section. It's downloaded much, much less so. It really falls off after the plan and the guide. But I think it's worth noting that the deployment guide has been a fairly active living document. So I can't go forward without talking about what it said in our opportunities to grow in our strategic plan. And I think, where do we need to pick it up, right? And this is back in 2020. And some of the ideas here, we need a dedicated TSMO committee. There had been, these committees are difficult to keep going in many respects. Inconsistent understanding of TSMO. There's no meeting I attend or go to where I don't give them the overview of what TSMO is, like I did in this meeting, because people don't always understand it, and we need to have the same understanding. We need a current inventory of software platforms. One of the things I learned for sure at ITS World Congress, it's not so much the hardware that we're concerned with, though hardware is important, but increasingly we're seeing that people are bringing software solutions to the current hardware. And more people are selling hardware or software, not hardware. The hardware is out there, but you know what I'm saying. And then finally, gaps in data sharing, data platforms, and data governance. I think I had already mentioned that. Right, so being fairly new to TSMO, I didn't really understand, thinking about our update, what do I need to know? And I got involved with this Connected Transportation Network project. It's with the ITS JPO at Federal Highway. And as a quick overview, it's sort of think of it as an app that provides both navigation, connected vehicle, TSP, indoor navigation, a whole range of things, ostensibly built for the elderly or the disabled, but it's sort of a universal type of app. And one of the things with walking through it, I realized that a lot of the issues that we are struggling with in this project, our peers are also struggling with, that we were not struggling alone, that these problems that we thought were unique were not unique. We also noted that the speed of technological change sometimes exceeds the problems. What we thought would work 5 years ago, some of those technologies may have sort of taken a side path. Scalability drives regional success. User availability. You can see in this map here that this corridor where we're doing the work, I was on a presentation to the State Independent Living Council of Georgia, their board, talking about this project. And when it came to Q&A, one of the head of the board asked me, so this will be available across Georgia. I almost burst out in tears because I had to tell them that, you know, this is like a small wedge of Gwinnett County. That this scalability, like when this thing is everywhere, when it's all interconnected, then it will work for everyone. But getting it to work even in these small places is challenging. But again, scalability is what's going to make it work at the regional level. We realize that business practices, intergovernmental agreements are essential, but they're also limited. And I have here by unique situations, try again. We had a bunch of situations where servers were turned off for rebooting at one point in Gwinnett County. And when they came back on, some of the add-ons were not also flipped on with it or rebooted with it. And so they didn't work. And it wasn't that the folks, once they were alerted to it, didn't know how to do it and they did it, that was fine. But that it just wasn't part of the business plan because it was new. And it occurs to me that every new application is going to require a new business practice or agreement. And it's also limited by the workforce, right? There are only so many IT people in Gwinnett County and they can't be everywhere at once putting out a million fires. And so I think that there is something we forget along with freight perhaps in these agreements is who's doing this work. Whoops. So, as I said before, we're in the process of putting up an update. What does that look like? And again, thanks to Lori Matkowski for this. But what is the delta since our last update, right? Really thinking about what it is we've done or haven't done since then. And so we're conceptualizing this by putting a peer review of best practices first, right? We want to know what is working elsewhere. We want the facts first, and then we want to update the vision and goals. I was a professor in a policy school, and data-driven decisions were like the mantra of everything. Keep the end user foremost in mind. Right? Did it meet the systems engineering gets to this, but did it meet the needs of the user? Is it secure? Is it private? How is the tech applied? It's not just that, again, it's not just that you're using the tech, but that you're applying it to solve a problem. And I'm almost there, friends. Right, so I'm coming back to where I started about all of our plans and when you think about your updates. And I think, you know, we're all going to have different emphasis areas because we're all doing different things differently. Our capabilities, our strengths are all different. I think we need to think about what's changed. What have we changed? What's changing? I think those are serious considerations looking forward. Steal that idea. I cannot, you know, I'm here presenting you best practices from ARC, and really I'd like to hoover all your brains to find out what you're doing right. That's what I really want to know. And then how will the plan benefit the user? I couldn't resist. I had some leftover musings and I wanted to just, this is my last slide, and I just wanted to sort of take a second here. Things that didn't really fit into the rest of the presentation, but as we start thinking about being a TSMO manager, you know, what is keeping up with change look like? That to me is a fascinating question, because I don't know that we have a full model for that. This is our third time around with an update, and we're just now starting to get our handle on that. Capabilities, right? How do we coordinate? Who coordinates? How do we keep up with changes in the need to coordinate? Maybe the governance strategies we have are obsolete, and maybe it's not about governance. Maybe it's some other, there's some other sort of way or capabilities that we need to move these things forward. I think it's important to foster both public and private deployment. There's certainly a public realm that I am entrusted with, but there's also a private realm, such as these Waymo cars, or now these, we have, in Atlanta anyway, we have little robots on the street that are delivering food downtown to different agencies and whatnot. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool, but that's not what I would do, because I'm in the public sector. So I think it's a great model for thinking about things. And I think, we need both of those elements. And lastly, legibility. Again, how is this meaningful? All of us have seen or created reports that they say sit on a shelf or become a doormat. I think what's important here is how, what brings meaning to this update, and then how will the folks that read it understand it? And with that, I am done. And Nick, I've gone a little long. I apologize, but that is my presentation.
Okay. Thanks, Joseph. A couple questions. How has the plan and maybe some of the strategies been viewed by your ARC board members, or just the board, and maybe some of your stakeholders?
Yeah, that's really good. Again, I think that there's varying understandings of what it is. And so a roundabout, maybe as far, maybe as TSMO as any place could be, we think about public works directors in some of the outlying counties, and they're like, why would I need roadside units? How does that help me? And then I have communities that have gone all in on creating connected, embracing connected vehicle technology. I think the example I like to use is Marietta, Georgia. They needed to, they were having problems or issues with response times for fire trucks. And so they were talking about centralizing the location of their firehouse, which was very expensive. What they did instead was they came up with signal preemption for their fire trucks. And what it did was it reduced the time sufficiently so they were able to they didn't have to build anything, buy and build anything, right? So they clearly embraced it. They had a problem, and they embraced the technology to solve that problem as a way to avoid these other messy mixes. So I think it's a mixed bag.
Okay. And you touched on this a little bit, but I think you talked a little bit about connected vehicles and some of the robots. And I know there's a lot going on in Georgia with V2X. How is that being considered as part of the overall strategies in the plan as you move forward?
Yeah, I think that falls, depending on what we're talking about specifically, it's kind of this public-private. We want to move the public availability, the scale of the roadside units, the fiber that GDOT's putting down. We want to get this out there, but also we want to foster Waymo. We hear are the bad things in the news, but I'm here to tell you, I see a dozen of them a day, and it stopped for my bicycle the other day. Right? So I think that there's a multi-tiered approach, and I think that we're not 100% sure how that would proceed, but I think we're needing to be open to it because it's happening faster then we can get our arms around it.
Great presentation. Just a couple questions. When so you currently have a plan that was adopted. What is the timeline for your next plan to or the current plan to be updated? And what's the process for that?
It's a great question. We give them a lifespan of 10 years, and we did make 10 years on our last one. And, are things changing so quickly? I think one of the benefits is we started this strategy within the context of COVID and seeing patterns change, and so we could be relevant. But with a combination of resources, straight answer is we won't begin until at least 2028, and wouldn't look to adoption until 2030.
Okay. Another question is, does your MPO provide funding for the locals to implement what you have all identified?
Yes, that was that little green box on the funding diagram. I think Joseph showed a slide of more specifics about a program budget. So we at the metro regional level have a funding pool, and through a policy process, we're choosing which programs to fund. So demand management's one of them, and TSMO is another. We have a transit-oriented development fund and something else I'm forgetting. So we, that's where that decision is made. And then what's interesting is we then get to sub-allocate that funding with our TSMO subcommittee of the regional process. And so we developed a criteria, and really the decision remains with the technical experts. It's really delegated at that point, how we spend the Metro resource, which is nice. We don't go all the way back to Metro Council for each of these recommended projects.
Now, do you get a certain set budget every year, or how's that determined?
It's every 3 years on the federal funding cycle with the MPOs formula funds. So
Okay.
It does require a policy process to go through, and at that point I will be presenting to various leaders in the region, and talking about the outcomes from our program, communicating the value, and hopefully seeing that TSMO still meets the policy and gets funded another 3 years.
Okay, have you ever come across any contentious data, and how have you addressed this within the plan?
Contentious data, or just not enough data, or just interpreting data two ways. I think one thing is one of the TSMO program projects is to have a data warehouse at Portland State University, and that keeps track of what's coming off the system. So any station or counter, and we've been able to validate and look at whether some of the private sector data meets our needs. And at times it has not, and contracts have not been continued because of that. So that's, yeah. And then I think just more data. We need, we do have a good picture of reliability on arterials now, but we didn't have that always. So yeah, building up more data in more places. We also have an Oregon travel survey that's going to tell us more of the origin destination data that I referenced as being important to how we allocate resources. So I'm looking forward to that.
Okay. I have a couple questions for both of you. First one is, can you describe the outreach process to your local partners?
A monthly meeting is, that subcommittee of our kind of policy leader process. That's made up of our technical experts. That's a public meeting. Anybody's welcome to join and discuss what's on the agenda. We come around some technical partnerships to share fiber optics for better data communications, and that's through an agreement. And we also use that as a data network that goes between agencies. And then I guess more recently with transit signal priority, we have a lot of pilot testing, a lot of work to, the traffic engineers may be on board with the system, but their IT department has some, firewall issues or something cybersecurity related they need to work through. So that we have set up some special meetings to iron all that out.
At ARC, I would say this is not happening as well as we would like. There had been committees, Eric TSMO committee. It is fallow right now. We're getting that going again. We're going to use the update as an opportunity for that. We do make, I've made presentations to our transportation coordinating committee, and there will be presentations eventually to the board and whatnot. And I think that, so that's, the primary outlet for those. Obviously we network with different individuals or projects that bring us together. So for example, our ITS for Us project, I speak with people from Gwinnett County. There was a CV1K project where they were installing roadside units before COVID stopped it. And some of the places where those have been installed, I talk with some of the counties or the officials that are in those areas, because I think, because they're interested, I'm interested. I want to hear what they have to say, what they think, how it's working, and so forth. But I think that's one of the areas, as was noted in our priorities, that we probably need to do a better job on.
Can I add one more thing I skipped over? Is during the development of our strategy is, of course, we had an engagement plan and we listed where are our contacts to help as an advisory committee, and who are we reaching out to in the community, where are we hearing these voiced needs. And so we had some resource for all that through the planning process, and we wanted to get to director level, so we had leaders helping us shape the TSMO strategy so they could really carry out, they would recognize what our program was when, these projects came through or new projects were proposed. But we did not have all the resources that, say, a MPO's RTP would have. We had a scaled back engagement effort because a TSMO strategy is not gonna, not gonna have the budget or is not, quite the long range planning effort that the whole region is looking across all modes.
Okay. From the operations side, even though your agencies are not operational agencies, when it comes to traffic incidents or any type of emergency type situations, what is your agency's role in either supporting or getting information out to the public?
Yeah, first of all, the Safe Streets for All funding and our colleagues that have been doing safety efforts have really put the data together to, put an emphasis. Just in our strategy, we heard, street lighting is a real issue, and a lot of these pedestrian crashes are at night. So that's kind of a planning and projects, but when we don't have a role for any one particular incident. We, want to see the traffic incident managers convening, that's showing up in a room with a lot of chiefs with badges, it's great to see, but not, something we have direct operations. We want to see those emergency transportation routes. And we also pitch in to support more funding for like drone crash investigation that really saves time on the roadway. It can cover the same territory an investigator can, and a fraction of the time. And so you clear up your road and resume traffic sooner. So we've supported Oregon State Police going after funding for that.
Yeah, I'm going to say again, we don't own, operate, or manage any of the facilities, but I'm going to say that Georgia DOT is amazing in their efforts to deal with incident management. They have the Navigator system, obviously with travel information, real-time travel information. They have a traffic management center where they're able to, with thousands of cameras, they're able to send units to clear. They will set their HERO program. The acronym escapes me now, but it's basically trucks waiting to go to move things. So they're able, again, if you've been in Atlanta, you know that congestion and traffic is a big thing here. And I think that funding for those kinds of projects to keep that going, and GDOT's really aggressive posture in taking care of that is admirable. It really does. What's the word I want? They really do keep an eye on things and move things along so that the traffic isn't delayed. They have a giant traffic management center. I've been to it a couple of times. It's very impressive. And they take care of that. So I think I think that I meet with some of the people involved with that where things can be discussed incidentally, but yeah, that's all GDOT. I don't know that ARC, aside from perhaps funding in some initiatives, is we're not owning, managing, or operating any of it.
But there's support though. I mean, you guys are supporting these types of activities either through funding or some other. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and I encourage everybody in the MPO to take a ride with your incident response or your HERO, or be in that truck and see how it's operating. Yeah, I did that, and it was pretty eye-opening. We also have a traveler information system and share cameras across all agencies, so traffic cameras are there, and we have our local cities and counties updating those incidents. So we have and then that's all fed through API to the popular apps. And I forget because it's kind of hidden how it happens, but it's happening all the time.
Yeah, and and that's important because also there's a lot of new technology that's out there. And one of the things that we did down at ITS World Congress is that we had an emergency response and tech day where we invited in some of those first responders so they could see some of the tech that's out there. And if we get a chance, we could put up, there's some information on our in one of our newsletters regarding all of that. But it was really neat to see some of those demos and how all that technology works. And I think a lot of the responders were appreciative of finding out about that technology. Okay, question for both of you. Do you think you have moved beyond needing to sell TSMO solutions, and now you're able to focus on more of what solution and what TSMO solution or contribution to the overall solution, rather than why do we have to do TSMO?
I can start here. I think it depends. I think it varies dramatically to who we're speaking to, because people with technology are happy to hear about it and ready for what's new, and people that don't, or areas that don't have it, may not see the value of it. I think there's always a certain amount of selling that goes on in terms of these are solutions. But again, what are the problems they're solving? They may have other priorities. If you're a public works director in a small community, my coming around telling you about signal preemption may not move the needle at all. That being said, where we do get traction with it, we are able to start talking. The conversation is much more about what do we need, not I have to sell it to you. So I think there is a divide there, and I don't think you always know where that divide is, but you have to. I don't think you can ever not educate in this regard.
Yeah, I agree. You have to keep communicating and sharing, and that's partly because the technology changes, but also just new people come on board. We had a suburban city upgrade their pedestrian safety at signalized intersections, and then we came along talking about transit signal priority. And I thought, well, we just prioritized for the pedestrian. Well, we had to go back and think, okay, the signal priority for transit doesn't omit or supersede your pedestrian safety. It's working together. It's when the transit vehicle arrives and it's already going to clear for the passengers or for the pedestrians, to get to transit. So it was, just sort of communicating what works together, how these systems work together, and so that things aren't opposed just based on a misunderstanding. We also, with TSMO have a role, especially at an MPO in considering those major projects that are, tens of millions that need, we would like to see TSMO elements added. And so what is that? And then, to the other more obscure, to most transportation planning is, how's the data flowing from one place to another? We need our own TSMO investments for projects like that aren't going to be part of what people see. So yeah, always have to communicate.
And I want to jump on something you said, Caleb, which I think is so good, which is that there's turnover. That cannot be underestimated. Both turnover and the numbers of people that are available to do the work or understand or come up through the work. All it takes is I find that without an advocate in an agency or in a locality, you're starting over in many cases. You are starting over, even if they have technology, because to Caleb's point, to add, to say, hey, we have software that will now use your cameras to monitor not just the road, but the condition of the road or the weather or some other element of it. And you could get a blank stare back at you. Doesn't it already do that? We have to do this, and then we have to do all these other things. I mean, because it's not as simple as, handing over a box or something. It requires this additional coordination. And again, if turnover, the lack of understanding, who understands it, where they are in the organization, all those things create obstacles, challenges, frictions that you have to overcome, I think, somewhat regularly.
Okay, for Caleb, how was it decided to warehouse the data at Portland State University? And do you find that warehousing data at a local university is a unique model for an MPO?
I think, and I'm sure most MPOs are engaged with their local university for research and development. And then of course, most universities are in the transportation world are a consortium of several. So I think, whatever the MPO is working on should be, sort of have a research and development arm. The reasons for the data archive are a bit historic because it was so expensive in the early 2000s to warehouse all this data flowing in, and so we needed the architecture and the somebody to manage all this data. And since then, with signal phasing and timing data that's streaming in from intersections, there's been such a growth of data. So I would say it's that the reasons are historic and for reducing costs and sharing a system. And some of it's related to an open data policy, so that we have sort of one resource, one truth, one place where everybody can consultants, public, advocates can go and find the data and process it. So some of it is born out of that. But then I guess fast forwarding to today, what is, where are we doing helpful TSMO research and development, Portland State University's, helping with looking at artificial intelligence, machine learning, and speaking to sort of the big data questions. And they're also training folks to do that. Not only the students attending Portland State, but also our TSMO staff at our agencies. They've offered SQL training, the statistics software, and also APIs and SQL training. Did I mention? Anyway, they've offered, there's one other I'm forgetting, but it's been great to have them as a partner, not only to share the data, but to store the data, but to, expand our capability, our training.
Okay. Question for both of you. Does your agency have any role in introducing or piloting new technologies or systems?
Yes.
Well, go ahead, Caleb.
No, you thought of one.
Yeah, I mean, so we are involved, as I think I mentioned in my presentation, this ITS for Us project, ITS JPO, Federal Highway project, and we are, the co-deployment managers of this project. The work is being done obviously by not obviously, but it's being done by consultants. But our role is, sort of the convener, the nexus through which all the elements flow. There are so many partners: Georgia Tech, GDOT, the county of Gwinnett County, and everyone else. And I think what's important, our role that's important is keeping these parts aligned and moving forward. And as we get into the next phases of it, we will be responsible at some level in operating or helping to operate, or taking the data from parts of the work or the project and determining, how is it working or what needs to be done here. So, this is a case where, again, it's sort of a pilot project, but we're, we are in the mix on that. And it's something, like I said, I don't think we own it, operate it, but we sort of manage it. I think this is a good way to say it. Co-deployment managers, something like that. So.
Okay.
Yeah, and along, with the TSMO program, we've, had a disruption of a lot of, sort of emerging mobility and emerging technologies. And so shared use mobility with all the e-scooters and introduction of, shared bike systems. We had a pilot of how can the city of Portland and how can other agencies track and make sure those private, operators are meeting city policy, and also, paying revenue where that's the policy, and so to keep operating in the city of Portland. So that was a pilot that has turned into a bigger system, and sort of a public-private operator still going in Portland. And then yes, more recently, in terms of piloting technologies, we do have our traffic engineers at several agencies working to evaluate new sensor technology at intersections, and one of them's a partnership with Oregon State University and City of Portland to look at LiDAR and different cases for for using them as detection, and then yeah, I think it just goes on from there. So the MPO, is going to maybe fund a project that is a pilot, and not be involved to, I guess, really, the range is also to champion what comes out of that test and bring it into our future investments and say, okay, we saw this work here. We know it can work elsewhere in the region. Transit signal priority is a big, one that, I'm supported by not just what we've partnered with TriMet, but our other sides of Metro with improving high capacity transit and better bus operations.
Okay. I know we're right at time here, but I have
Okay.
one more question that came through. When you guys deploy your strategies, how do you assess or evaluate their effectiveness? And then how do you share that information?
Yeah, I wish it were more routine. We're first of all making sure when we program our funds, when we're going through a prioritization process, I think that's the biggest connection to make sure we're evaluating under the strategy, or sorry, funding projects under the strategy. So that clears one big element, and then the other is kind of looking at what all the TSMO, I have a list of all the TSMO related projects in our region, and I look through and see how many of these cover the 21 actions we have in our TSMO strategy, and what are we missing? Some things are going on without much TSMO program support, so that's great. Like TriMet keeps innovating their trip tools for travelers to catch, and also their transit information displays. So there's not a big participation there, but we'll still count it in this overall regional rollout. So I think it's mainly like what's going on in the region, what are the gaps? And then we have some, we're keeping up with our congestion management process evaluation, but that's through the national data set and other evaluation touch points.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a good answer for that. We are certainly monitoring data, but we are not collecting the data. That is, our work with GDOT sort of falls into that. But I don't know, and again, with the congestion mitigation, like what Caleb was saying, there's some of that, but that's at a different level. I can't answer that question because I'm not 100% sure how to answer that properly right now. So
Okay.
I'll leave it at that.
Fair enough. All right. Well, I just want to thank both of you, both Joseph and Caleb. Thanks for all of the fantastic information. I want to thank all of our participants for hanging in there. I know we went a little bit over, but I think this was a great discussion. And just wanted to also let folks know that if you are attending the AMPO annual meeting, which is coming up next week, NOCO will have a booth at that meeting. We're booth number 1. So if you want to continue the conversation or you want to find out more about what we do, swing by and we're happy to talk with you. So thanks again, and hope everybody has a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Joseph. Thank you all.